This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
It's Tariffs Eve. That's right, the 31st of January, the final day Canadians, Mexicans, for that matter, Americans have before Donald Trump imposes his promised tariffs, 25% on goods crossing the border, unless things change, and we're not ruling that out. Let me say, as we are recording this, and a shout out to everybody who's watching us live right now on the Real Talk live stream presented by California Closets. I want to, Johnny, first of all, good morning. Happy Friday to you, pal. I want to give a big shout out. Praptor's watching us live on YouTube already in the super chat with a $5 donation. Praptor, amazing. Thank you very much. Says Pierre Poilievre is Timu Trump. That said, can we please get a Midas Touch Real Talk crossover to compare the two and discuss cross-border issues? Love it. Already on it. We don't like to talk too much about the wheels we're trying to get in motion, because the fact of the matter is, in producing talk shows, a lot of the times 50, 60, 75% of your big ideas never pan out. And then we're just going to look like we're having a hard time lining up guests. But I will disclose, following the Charlie Angus interview, if you've been hanging out, we call it our Real Talk pre-roll. If you were watching some of the shorts that we put together here ahead of when the live stream commences, you heard Charlie Angus calling the American president a pervert, basically calling them out, looking for a fight. Well, that was on Midas Touch, that show, and we reached out to both Mr. Angus and to the host of the show to talk to them about that. So, Praptor, I love it. Wheels in Motion, shout out to you, and thanks for kicking in and supporting the show. Tariffs expected to be imposed in the next number of hours by February 1st, so says Donald Trump, although there's some wavering right now on what's going to be included. For example, the president musing just a few hours ago about maybe excluding Canadian oil and gas. Well, that's a pretty big one. We're looking forward to this episode, this edition of the Real Talk Roundtable. Is we're going to welcome two experts on both sides of the border. Sabine El-Chidiac will be joining us from Canada, and Elizabeth Hicks will be checking in from Detroit, Michigan. We'll get sort of two perspectives on these tariffs and ultimately what this all means. Plus, President Donald Trump, we referenced and mentioned and touched on that horrific aviation crash just outside Washington, D.C., basically hours before we were doing our January 30th episode. And John and I both kind of sitting there feeling like, what do you say in a situation like this? All souls on board lost. I mean, we're starting to learn more. You know by now, if you've been paying attention to the news, some international figure skating stars and their moms and their coaches, and just horrific. And the world is kind of aghast. And some of us are seeing this dash cam footage of a basically a commuter jet and a military helicopter colliding in midair. I mean, number one, what are the chances? And number two, just a fireball, all of them into the river. Horrific. And while the rescue efforts quickly turned into recovery efforts, which is always a bit of a gut punch, is still underway, the American president, Donald Trump, behind a microphone, starts calling out Pete Buttigieg, starts calling out DEI practices, starts finding ways to blame this on Barack Obama and everybody else. Drops the bullshit bomb, by the way, behind the presidential seal. I was trying to remember, when is the last time a sitting American president has sworn behind a mic? I don't know. Maybe it's all just a reminder that the stakes have changed and the game is different when you're dealing with the Donald, right? So we reached out to Dante King. Dante is an HR management consultant. He's going to join us. A little bit different on a Friday. We'll do our roundtable. We're going to talk to Dante King about that assertion that the FAA, basically the Federal Aviation Authority in the U.S., is overrun by DEI and has taken a huge hit in credibility and quality standards. Sounds absolutely ridiculous, but what's the proper response? And what are the 350 million Americans that hear that and the rest of the world that hears that supposed to think about the whole scenario? We'll get into that with Dante King about 40 minutes from now. And then we have a huge moment coming up here on the show. We very rarely get to do live draws. We don't give away a lot of prizes, John. But the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic is coming up the day after we're doing this show. Saturday, February 1st in St. Albert. Mm-hmm. It's going to be an unbelievable day in support of a great cause.
Cold day.
And it is going to be a cold day.
Snowy day.
I want to remind everybody,
Long
though,
day.
because there's going to be a lot of people sitting here going, should we come out and watch? Should we come out and cheer everybody on? It's going to be like minus 22, maybe not. I want to let you know we have big festival tents out there, and we have a 700,000 BTU.
Is that the correct
propane
number?
heater. That is the correct number.
It's insane.
It is 700,000 BTUs. This propane heater will fill that festival tent with the warm vibes that you need to make it through a wintry day. It's going to be Canadian at its finest. Burgers, beers, bonfires, the whole 9 yards. It's going to be a lot of fun. But here's why we bring it up right now. We had our early bird deadline. When you're throwing an event like this, you want to get the teams registered as quickly as possible. So you heard me talking on the show a while ago. Everybody registered before January 1st was into our early bird draw. We will be doing that live on the air today after we talk to Dante King. And whoever's name is drawn, whichever team is drawn, is going to win, among other things. Like they win a bunch of DQ bucks to go spend at DQ. They win a bunch of we got these like drink tokens, beer tokens, so they're going to be drinking for free at the Pond Hockey Classic. But they're going to win 6 drink rail seats at Rogers Place to watch the Edmonton Oilers host Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs. That goes at 5 p.m. Just as the Pond Hockey Classic wraps up, and you're going to say, Jespo, really? These people, they're going to have been crushing beers all day, and then you're going to send them basically to another postal code. What's your plan for safety? Let me tell you. That's why we went ahead and got a limo bus. And so we're going to put all these 6 lucky winners, one team, 6 players, on a limo bus on their way to Rogers Place to go check out the Hockey Night in Canada opening game, the early game, McDavid versus Matthews. Okay, so we'll be doing that draw live on the air, limo bus and tickets to the Oilers game. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. But let's talk tariffs. Before we go there, I want to let you know and remind you that Business Career College has been in the business of online financial training since 1997. They've been around the block, they've seen a lot, and they're the best at what they do. Well, of course, it's on their radar that the next generation of investors, 75% of them polled, are interested in decentralized finance. They want to know how things like Bitcoin, crypto assets, NFTs, and of course the blockchain all kind of works into their long-term savings plan. Now, you want to know what you're talking about when you're advising your clients, right? So if you're a senior financial professional, if you're a financial advisor, you're going to want to make sure you're leveled up with your Certified Digital Asset Advisor designation, the CDAA designation. This is an amazing way to reassure your clients that you're up to speed on where the world of finance is going, and also to be offering informed advice. You can sign up for that CDAA designation today at businesscareercollege.com. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan20, that's all one word, Ryan20, to knock 20% off the investment of the Certified Digital Asset Advisor at businesscareercollege.com. Donald Trump says that unless something changes in the next number of hours, the United States will impose 25% tariffs on 2 of their biggest trading partners, and certainly the closest geographical neighbors, Canada and Mexico. What does this mean for Americans? Will it restore their wealth? Could it lead to eliminating income tax, as the president has hinted? And of course, what does it mean for trading partners like Canada, whose economy depends a great deal on trade with the United States? It's a pleasure to welcome Sabine El-Chidiac from the Consumer Choice Center. She holds a BA in political science from the University of Toronto, an MA in political science from the University of Western Ontario. And joining Sabine today is her colleague, the U.S. policy analyst with Consumer Choice Center. She's going to be joining us from Detroit, Elizabeth Hicks, who's graduated with a BA in political science from the University of Iowa, spent a good portion of her career in Washington, D.C., and is now back in the Midwest. To both of you, thanks for making time for us. Thanks for joining us. Elizabeth, I want to start with you. Stateside, a lot of people are going, well, listen, Donald Trump has changed course last minute before. Perhaps there's a way that these tariffs can be avoided. There's, as you know, been delegates of diplomats from Canada and Mexico working hard on this ever since Trump swore in. Before that, even, what do you think the chances are that February 1st the tariffs are a go? Is this happening?
It is tough to say, but it seems that, yes, it's likely that it will go through. We have heard potentially that oil will be excluded from these tariffs, but it's unclear as to if that will happen or not. These tariffs that are being proposed are really just being used as a negotiating tool. For what is unclear. Are we trying to just get the US a better trade deal? At the end of the day, though, these tariffs are not going to work, and the consumers are the ones who are going to feel those negative effects.
Yeah, but do you get the sense that your fellow Americans buy into that they believe that? From the northern side of the border, we're seeing people cheer this on. It looks like everybody's a pretty big fan of it, and who wouldn't be when the president is promising a path to prosperity?
I think when you look into it, some may be excited, but when you look at what this is actually going to do, it's not going to bring cost of living down. It's not going to reduce the cost of goods. We've heard this rhetoric from President Trump before of, America first, buy American. Unfortunately, though, we need our trading partners. We need Canada in particular. And if we impose these types of tariffs, it is going to be problematic. I think consumers are very concerned about this. Of course, 25% on Canada is a problem. There also is the potential for retaliatory tariffs back on the US. Even if there aren't retaliatory tariffs put back on the US, it's still going to affect American consumers negatively. So I don't think it is as popular of a policy right now than the president might think.
This is the message, Sabine, that Canadian diplomats, you've got federal cabinet ministers, you got provincial premiers. Danielle Smith is doing what she can. Of course, you got Doug Ford doing what he can. Everybody's got their messages trying to change Donald Trump's mind. What's been your assessment of the Canadian response to the threat so far?
I think there's actually a pretty united front on the idea that tariffs are bad and that tariffs are just a tax on your own people, and it's going to hurt us. We're in an affordability crisis. My sense is that people realize that they're in an affordability crisis. They can't pay a lot of money for groceries and everyday essentials anymore. And these tariffs are just going to make things worse. And there is a support for people like Premier Ford, some support for Premier Smith in talking about the fact that tariffs are bad. Of course, there's different perspectives on how to deal with these tariffs, whether or not there should be retaliatory tariffs from Canada or if we should be avoiding that altogether. Those are a whole different story, and a lot of people have different perspectives on that.
Let me ask you this, because both of you are you're consumer experts. You're experts on market and spending and how people's behavior responds to fiscal realities, right? So, Sabine, my guess is the last thing that you would want to see is some sort of a trade war.
Oh, absolutely. Trade wars never end well for anybody. Tariffs are a tax on your own people, as I said earlier. So it's not going to be great for the United States, for the consumers in the United States, and it's not going to be great for consumers here in Canada. Nobody wins in a tariff war. You might seem as a politician like you're doing something and you're taking these, definitive actions. But at the end of the day, consumers are going to suffer just on their everyday essentials, groceries, clothing, at the pumps. It's very difficult for consumers, no matter what.
Smith, as mentioned, and maybe Elizabeth will ask you about this first, just because of the implications. Ontario's Premier Ford has been clear. He says, we could cut power to like 1.5 million homes in New York and Michigan and Minnesota. Do those types? I mean, it's pretty inflammatory, obviously, when a premier says something like that. We're also kind of, as Canadians, we're very proud, but we're also kind of not used to like punching the U.S. in the nose. Do you know what I mean? Except for in hockey, we're used to that. But other than that, we're not used to it. Do those types of clips, does that quote make its way stateside? Does that resonate with people in New York? Is that anything anybody's losing any sleep over?
Yes, absolutely. And being a Michigander myself, it's very concerning. A lot of our states are tied to Canadian imports. But when it comes to energy in particular, this is very frightening for us here in the United States. We heard from President Trump that a priority is to continue, drilling and procuring more oil and gas. However, we rely on a lot of the Canadian oil and gas. And so it would make a very big impact, and it is very alarming for us here in the States. So please don't cut off our power.
Yeah. Well, Sabine, what do we know about those types of threats in past? I'm sure, like off the top of my head, obviously there have been sort of international scuffles like this before. This is really nothing new. Probably just with a more bombastic president. It's gleaning more headlines, obviously. But I mean, I think back even to interprovincial trade wars. You remember when Rachel Notley imposed the BC wine ban and Albertans weren't able to get their BC wine for a while? This was over her scuffle, Christy Clark and pipelines and the like. How long do these types of things, these retaliatory type tariffs, typically last, and are they effective?
Oh, Well, Ryan, if we look at history, it's pretty obvious that tariffs do not work, and retaliation to tariffs don't work either, and they just really, really hurt. And it may seem like it only hurts while the retaliation is in place, but there's actually, it's felt for a long time, but especially by consumers who are just trying to make ends meet. If you look back at history, there's so many examples of tariffs not working and retaliation not working. Even if you go back to like 1930, there's the Great Depression, there's the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. They put tariffs on Americans put tariffs on so many things, and world trade fell by like 66%, and it prolonged the Great Depression, and Canada retaliated, and by retaliating, they ended up in an economic depression. More recently, in 2018, we had the steel and aluminum tariffs that were imposed by President Trump, and they were felt a lot by Americans. They were paying the price for these issues, and even with washing machines that same year they wanted to make more washing machines in the United States, and they put a tariff on that, and dryers as well, because usually dryers are sold with washing machines, so it ended up being a tax on dryers indirectly as well. And it was Americans who ended up paying for that, millions and millions of dollars. And retaliation is just shooting ourselves in the foot. It sounds good. It sounds like we're doing something effective and strong to push back against these tariffs. But at the end of the day, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. We're making sure that Canadians are going to be paying more for everyday essentials. And economists agree that tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, any tariffs at all, affect the poorest in society the most. So, in a time when we're struggling with an affordability crisis, this is just bad policy.
Cherie's watching us live on YouTube right now on our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. Cherie says, I check all my labels now, and I never used to do that to this degree. Buy Canadian, says Cherie. That's certainly one way that people are going to be impacted by this. They're going to find some motivation to either buy American if they're down in the States, to buy Canadian if they're in Canada. Economist Trevor Tombe has estimated, a conservative estimate, that if imposed, these tariffs could cost American households $1,900 annually. That's per household. Rather, $1,700 U.S. annually, or $1,900 for Canadian households. This amid an affordability crisis. And Elizabeth, I'm pretty sure it's not just Canadians that are experiencing this affordability crisis right now, but there's a lot of people that are having. I mean, in our neck of the woods right now, this morning it is dumping snow. It's going to be like minus 20 Celsius. Coming up tomorrow, people are paying more to heat their homes. People are paying more to feed their families. Among the American base, among Trump's American base, can you comment on what heaping $1,700 in added costs to the average household might do to voter loyalty, what it might do to people's bottom lines?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that President Trump was elected under the campaign promises of making life more affordable. Under a previous administration, we saw inflation go way out of control. However, an increase of $1,700 per household is not going to be welcomed by anybody here in the United States. And I think that is going to cause some problems for the president and some issues with loyalty in his base.
Interesting comment here from Sailing Jura, who says, I think our best response would be to avoid the trade war and boost international media appearances to remind Americans that these increased costs are from the U.S. and not from Canada. I can comment on what's happening in our neck of the woods. I can comment on what I'm seeing all the time. The Premier of Alberta's principal secretary yesterday on her Instagram was, sharing photos of Danielle Smith doing an interview with Fox News. It appears to me that a Fox crew actually traveled to Edmonton to speak to the Premier. Do these work? Sabine, how important are these international media appearances? A lot of people have ripped Danielle Smith, saying she's just trying to get in front of cameras, wants to get in tighter with Tucker Carlson, wants her photo with Ron DeSantis, wants to rub shoulders with Donald Trump and Kevin O'Leary. But can that stuff actually sway the public?
I think anything you do that is not retaliatory tariffs is a good idea. Just trying to convince, policymakers that this is going to hurt so badly in Canada, in the United States, is important. If you're taking those meetings, if you're going out there and talking about it, I think it's a great idea. because it's not putting retaliatory tariffs. If you're not putting retaliatory tariffs on as a response, then you're doing something good, in
Okay,
my
so
opinion.
what are everyone says, well, like, let's avoid the trade war. I just read a comment that said that, Elizabeth, and folks say, well, let's work on diplomacy instead. Can we all acknowledge, I mean, whether you're a big Trump supporter, whether you're a big Kamala supporter, or whether you don't care about politics at all, everybody knows, even if you watched him on The Apprentice, dealing with Donald is completely different than dealing with anybody else. There may be diplomacy, but it's got to be done differently. You mentioned earlier, Liz, that you're not even quite sure exactly what it is that Trump wants Canada and Mexico to do. He said that he wants to stop the flow of weapons and fentanyl across the border. He seems to be convinced that the U.S.-Canada border, obviously the largest shared border, it's a legendary border internationally for a million different reasons, but he's not convinced that it's safe. Do you think that that's actually what this is about, or is this Trump's long game towards something else? Where's your head at on it?
For me personally, it feels like it's more of a long game play. What he had said previously, to me, that doesn't necessarily apply to Canada. We've had a great relationship. Like you mentioned, we have a historic border. It's, I believe, the longest shared border in the world. So it's operated very well. I think it's a play for something bigger. We're just unsure as to what. Is it going to be, renegotiations of the North American trading bloc potentially? We are just unsure. However, what we don't appreciate is President Trump is playing chicken with our checkbooks as consumers. And that's not what we think is what should be happening right now.
The interesting comment here, and I'm not surprised that some folks are basically pointing out this exempting oil and gas is pretty interesting, because that feels like a win for Alberta, but not everybody in Alberta, right? Like Denise watching us on the live chat powered by Park Power says, Alberta oil and gas gets a pass, while Alberta agriculture and lumber is left out in the cold. James responded to him and said, yeah, what else is new? It's been kind of striking to see other industries haven't really been championed in the same way by the premier. And then you could probably make the argument, I bet you that there's manufacturers, exporters in Manitoba, in Newfoundland, in Saskatchewan that would love to have as much light shone on their industries, and it just hasn't happened. Sabine, can you talk about the significance of oil and gas, and maybe, I don't know, I'm a decent poker player, not great, but I feel like all the talk about exempting oil and gas gives a bit of a hint, gives a bit of a clue that it is a powerful card to play. How should that card be played?
It's a very powerful card to be played, of course. Gas, we're the number one importer of crude oil to the United States, period. So we're the largest supplier of crude oil to the United States. If they're putting tariffs on that, hopefully they don't. Seems like it's going in that direction, but I can't say anything for sure, as usual on this trade war. It changes every minute, but if that's not included, that's great for both Americans and Canadians. But I do agree that it's too bad that this isn't being looked at for other industries like lumber. When we're talking about things like lumber, more expensive lumber means that we're paying more for our homes, both in Canada and the United States. It hits the lumber industry in Canada. They lose jobs, just like in the oil sector. They're going to lose jobs. The sector is going to suffer financially, and Americans are going to pay more for their homes. They're already having problems paying for a home. There's a housing crisis both in Canada and the United States. If we're putting tariffs on lumber, less homes are going to be built potentially, and those homes that are built are going to cost more. So at the end of the day, we do have to shine the light on what's going to happen when we put tariffs on every industry. But it's a relief. Any industry is getting looked at perhaps getting taken out of the equation, because the less tariffs, the better. So I'm hoping that continues as the realization becomes clearer that how harmful these tariffs are going to be. Perhaps today it's gas, but tomorrow the lumber industry, and after that, agriculture, because we don't want to pay $5 for a loaf of bread we used to pay $3.50 for at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that this is like it's one of those things where there'll be like short-term pain, and then the long-term story. Obviously, we can only speculate about that right now. Housing prices is obviously a huge one. I did see somebody wrote an email into the show a while ago and said, you know what, if the lumber tariffs are really heavy and if this really does impact the cost of importing Canadian lumber to the U.S., maybe Canadian builders would have less of a tough time getting access to the wood they need. It might drop the price of wood in Canada. Who knows? Maybe that's a pipe dream, but maybe that's a silver lining. Sabine, could you see that happening? Is there potentially like a silver lining to these tariffs, aside from maybe bringing a nation together? I've seen a lot of people saying we need to do more refining here at home. We need to do more manufacturing. We need to find other export markets. All of this stuff really makes sense. But are there any other silver linings?
I don't see any silver linings with the trade war, personally. I've looked at historical examples, and these conversations have been had in the past, and it ends up that nobody wins. Everybody suffers financially, especially the poorest in society, especially just average everyday consumers. And we've done it before with Canada, the United States, and we've seen historically there aren't any silver linings at the end of the day. Trade has to be free so that people save money, people get the best prices for their products, and industries thrive. Having trade partners allows industries to thrive. There's no need for there to be trade restrictions so that the lumber industry in Canada thrives. It's thriving. It's doing a great job in providing lumber in Canada and the United States. Why cut off a part of that income that they're making that employs so many Canadians? At the end of the day, nobody wins in a trade war. Nobody wins when there's tariffs slapped on. Nobody wins when there's retaliatory tariffs. It's just bad policy.
Elizabeth, do you think these tariffs could encourage more domestic manufacturing in the States? That would obviously be big in the Rust Belt and in a lot of the areas that strongly supported Donald Trump in the most recent election. Or do you think American companies are too reliant on Canadian supply chains for that to even happen?
I think it could boost domestic manufacturing. However, I don't think we need tariffs to do that. I think we can do that without tariffs. And this is part of the issue is if we put tariffs immediately happening, then we don't have that infrastructure necessarily set up already to meet that demand. And so that's going to be part of the issue is there's just not going to be the availability of products for the consumers that they want. And so I think at the end of the day, we don't need these tariffs. They're going to be problematic for both sides, and consumers will be the losers, unfortunately.
Obviously, auto workers in your neck of the woods, as you mentioned, in Michigan could be greatly affected by this. Although, I mean, when you listen to Donald Trump talk about it, it sounds like this is going to be a huge boon for the auto sector in the U.S. But I think of dairy farmers in Wisconsin as maybe another example of areas that could be more acutely hit. I haven't asked at all. I've been a little bit I've been a little bit Canadian focused here. I haven't really talked about Mexico at all. But can you think of another impact in the United States, Liz, that we might see as a result of the tariffs, including on the Mexican side? To be honest with you, I haven't paid a lot of attention to how that's going to impact that relationship, Mexico and the U.S.
Yeah, well, I think with Mexico, they are a huge agriculture provider for us. So we're going to see a sticker shock at grocery stores. I think fruits, produce, a lot of those are going to increase for consumers. Again, when we're in this inflationary period, this is not the time for increased prices. So that's a big problem. And then back to the automobiles, being from Michigan, 13% of Michigan's gross state product is reliant on Canadian automotive trade. So if we're going to expand U.S. oil production and lower prices at the gas pumps, but then if auto parts are just going to get more expensive nationwide, how is that a win for consumers on either side here? These supply chains between our two countries are so integrated, between the three countries, really, but especially between the US and Canada. They're very highly integrated. I think this is one of the concerns is that most Americans don't understand that, especially when it comes to automobiles. Yes, we manufacture a lot of them, but a lot of these parts are coming from Canada. And coming from other places as well. And so it's really important that we maintain that relationship. I believe in 2022, Canada exported close to $13 billion in motor vehicle parts and accessories, and about 11.5 billion of that went directly to the US. So we're going to see a lot of sticker shock pricing happening if these tariffs go through.
Sabine, let me ask you this in closing. Pseudoscientist is watching right now on YouTube, great handle, says you only challenge someone if you have a chance to win, or you look crazy and low IQ. Under what conditions does Donald Trump submit to Canada? You can't even imagine that. Maybe pseudoscientist is watching from the States. I don't know, but that sounds like a bit of a defeatist perspective. Pseudoscientist maybe isn't up to speed on the story of David and Goliath. But is it true? Does Canada have a shot here? I don't think they're suggesting we just bend over backwards. But ultimately, I mean, the power imbalance is real.
I think it's going to feel like that, but once the numbers start to show up for consumers, once they start to see how much things are costing when you're attacking Canada, I think it's going to become very apparent to everyday Americans how difficult a trade war is going to be on their pocketbooks. So it may seem that way, but at the end of the day, when you're going to the pumps, if indeed there is a tariff on gas, you're going to be paying a lot more for your gas. You're going to be paying a lot more for your everyday essentials that you're already struggling to pay for with an affordability crisis. So it may seem that way, but a trade war just ends up hurting your pocketbook at the end of the day. So you're going to feel it.
I want to thank both of you for making yourselves available. Sabine, are you in Toronto proper?
I'm in Ottawa.
Oh, you're in
actually.
Ottawa, the nation's capital.
Yes.
Love it. Well, thank you for
Yes.
joining us from Ottawa. That's Sabine El-Chidiac, Elizabeth Hicks joining us from the great state of Michigan. Both of them collaborating on an editorial. Tomorrow's tariffs will hurt everyone. You can give that a read right now at consumerchoicecenter.org. Thanks to both of you. Appreciate your insights today.
Thank you so
Ryan.
much.
Yeah, you bet. We want to get into the Real Talk Live chat and see what you have to say. I mean, people are sounding off on this from all different angles. I mean, it's kind of hard to disagree with S. Scott K., who says we are absolute wimps when it comes to oil and gas, like a house party where we let the rich kids steal and destroy the place. If we had a backbone, we wouldn't sell our crude at a discount. And others of you are responding to that. I want to get to some of your responses. Were you ever at one of those terrible house parties in high school where things got totally out of control and kids started punching through the drywall? Did you ever witness anything like that?
Isn't that how it always was in the 90s? It was for me. Yeah. We didn't have the internet in full scope at that time. So we had to make our own entertainment, you know?
I remember being at one. I was there for like 10 minutes and, on my grandparents' grave. Had nothing to do with the destruction, but seeing a house party get absolutely out of control, and all of a sudden people are helping themselves to like electronics, and like damaging walls and stuff like that, and you're just sort of watching the kid whose parents are like away in Bermuda or something like that, and have no idea what's about to happen, and the kid is realizing in real time that this is not something they're going to be able to fix. This is not spilled wine on the carpet. This is a much bigger issue. And it was always a bit of a gut punch. So S. Scott painting a clear picture on Canada, giving too much of a discount on oil and gas. Now, of course, the clap back to that, the response to that, and it's predictable, is people talking about Canada's tanker ban. And, well, we kind of hamstrung ourselves, and we haven't been able to send oil elsewhere. And if you watch this show, that Pierre Poilievre is vowing to repeal C-69, to reverse it, to open up the world to international oil exports. And then, of course, common sense is that, well, if that happens, then you better expect huge protests from coastal communities and the like, sensitive areas, big oil tankers, and it's never easy. But we're always curious to know where you're landing on these types of conversations. We want to know where you're coming from on it. Right now, I want to remind you that our live chat that plays such a huge role in this show is powered by our friends at Park Power. You can find them online at parkpower.ca, doing an amazing job in communities across the province of Alberta, offering electricity, natural gas, and internet. We are a customer. We are a happy customer. They've got low rates, awesome service, and they share their profits with Alberta charities. I absolutely love that they do that. Park Power is currently offering the lowest fixed electricity rate in Alberta at 6.69 cents per kilowatt hour. If that's lower than what you're paying, I recommend you switch today. Winter's here. It's a great time to shop around for lower rates. Don't forget, you can find Park Power Ltd, Park Power Limited, on all the social channels, and you can find them online. Sign up today at parkpower.ca. Also want to direct your attention to our friends at North Road Investment Council. They've got such a great resource on their YouTube channel. If you want to learn a little bit more about what's happening right now with this First Home Savings account, For a lot of successful Canadian families, they want to help their kids get into the housing market. That's a big goal. And many young savers are using this first home savings account instead of an RRSP or TFSA in pursuit of the down payment of their first home. So the team at North Road Investment Council is helping parents with kids over the age of 18, young adults, make good use of this new savings account while managing the unique rules around that first home savings account. The annual contribution room is about $8,000, but if you don't use it within that second calendar year, it is permanently lost. You can check out northroadic.com. You can link to their YouTube channel from there. More great information, including a year-in review. Investing isn't always simple. Don't go it alone. Look to North Road Investment Council. If you're looking to better yourself and increase your job prospects this year, I want to encourage you to take 2 minutes today to visit athabascau.ca, Canada's open university offering world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. The admissions process is simple. They've got some excellent financial aid packages, and of course, the Athabasca Board of Governors with a big move earlier, just a few months ago, approving a 10% reduction in tuition for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit students in Canada as part of the university's ongoing efforts to enhance access and equity for Indigenous students. You can learn more about that at athabascau.ca/Indigenous. And all this talk about families paying more for groceries, all this talk about trying to stretch every dollar as best you can. Our friends at Friesen Brothers understand what is up when it comes to a family's bottom line. This is still a family-owned business in its 70th year. As we're talking to you, doing this show, it's the 31st of January. That means tomorrow, Saturday, February 1st, groceries at all of their 16 locations are going to be 15% off on purchases of $75 or more. The first of every month, groceries 15% off. That's a big deal. Purchases of $75 or more at Friesen Brothers. Friesen Brothers is Alberta grown and Alberta owned. Still thinking about that meal I took out, brought over to a friend's house earlier this week from Friesen Brothers, and I was raving about the braised beef short ribs and the warm potato salad and the pork ribs and the rotisserie chicken, and I saw Goose in our chat. You guys think we won't talk about stuff like this? I love talking about this. Goose says, but if I was going to pick up a meal like that from Friesen Brothers, it would probably be like a full day's wages. And I thought, you know what, I should just say the actual numbers and give people an idea.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, yeah. So it was all in, including a bouquet of flowers. So you get fresh flowers. This was a meaningful meal, so picked up a nice bouquet of flowers, including the flowers. It was $116 for 6 people to eat to their heart's content and then have leftovers for like 2 more days.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe that's not for everybody, but $116 including flowers to feed 6 people with leftovers is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't mind paying a little extra for quality ingredients as well, but every week you walk into like their fresh kind of area, their cooking area. There's always like a buffet for like $15-$20. There's always like all you can eat for this much. It really is like go in there, grab a to-go thing, fill it up.
Yeah, man.
And it's dinner for the night. It doesn't hurt your wallet.
You got it. Ryu Street Fighter in our live chat says, are people waking up?
Name.
Isn't that a great name? Finish him. Are people waking up to how important oil and gas are, industry, economy, etc.? Maybe people will start prioritizing economy over the social graces that Trudeau pushed on us. Maybe. I feel like there's been no shortage of people championing oil and gas, right? Like, would you agree that I think, prominence-wise, oil and gas has a stronger lobby, a more passionate lobby than probably any other Canadian industry?
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Somebody sent me a Simpsons clip where they had it was like an energy expo. And, and they've got the solar booth there. And it's the little, the little nerd guy from
Milhouse.
And the older man.
And
he's like talking about solar. And then the oil guys come in and they're like, they look like CIA or Secret Service guys with glasses, and they're like, tell us about this. Does it really work? And he's like, it's incredible. It works. It's powered by the sun. And then all of a sudden, like this screen comes across, and you hear this rustling, and then the screen opens again, and it's like it says like oil and gas. you're either with us or you're against us. We'll get you or something. But it's I think everyone has that feeling that it's such a powerful entity.
Of course.
Like it's almost impossible to go against them.
But I don't feel like, and Ryu Street Fighter, I get the point you're making, but I don't feel like people aren't aware of it. Like if you think of like every time, it's predictable. I just did it myself, but it's predictable. Every time it's like -20, everybody's like, thank an oil and gas worker. Or like when it's -30, that's when people really want to take shots at solar, and like our good friends at Kubi Renewable Energy, and they laugh about the stuff. They've got great answers, actually good Q&As on their website at kubi.ca. But people will say like, oh, how are your solar panels working when it's, like dark at 5 p.m. and it's -30, and everyone says we would be, freezing in the cold if it wasn't for oil and gas. And like to a certain degree, that's true. But you can also say that about a lot of industries, right? No disrespect to oil and gas, but like if the farmers stopped farming, you'd be equally as screwed, right? Like there's a lot of industries that without them, like power utilities workers, like people that, if gas stations closed down, like everybody, like but you don't have a lot of people. I mean, I was out for a beer the other night after Wednesday hockey with the boys, and there was a couple guys sitting in the booth down from us, and both of them wearing the same. They were wearing matching hoodies. It was kind of cute, But they were both wearing their "I love Canadian oil and gas"
I see them all the
hoodies,
time.
and I'm not mocking it. Like I'm just saying, it's a personality. It's like Jason Kenney when he went out, when he was premier and went out to the Grey Cup in Calgary. The premier of Alberta. What did he wear? He wore his "I love oil and gas, I love Canadian oil and gas" hoodie onto the field, and of course it was to provoke people and poke buttons, because at that time oil and gas and the role that it played in the economy and environmental action and climate change and the carbon tax was all and remains a big conversation.
Of course.
So oil and gas is like at the heart of it, and I get what Ryu Street Fighter, I get the point that they're making, but let's not forget that when, like, for example, when Northern Gateway, when that pipeline project collapsed, it's because the Supreme Court ruled there wasn't adequate consultation with coastal communities. It's not just been Justin Trudeau wanting us to use they, them pronouns and like everybody to get nicer socks. That's not it. It's because there are realities right now. And I think that it's great, if Pierre Poilievre comes in and is a huge advocate for Canadian oil and gas. I mean, Trudeau bought a pipeline, but if Poilievre does this, I just want everybody to remember, like, have measured and reasonable and smart expectations, that he can't just roll in on day one and all of a sudden, like, have a bunch of pipelines being constructed the next morning. It's not that easy.
I love Canadian oil and gas just as much as anyone, but it's this all or nothing attitude that it just irks me. Like, we need a good mix of energy. And if we can power things in the summer and warmer months for less money and conserve natural resources, I mean, I agree that we're always going to need oil in some capacity. But if it's finite, if it's not going to be around forever, let's conserve it. We need it we're always going to need diesel for large machinery. I always think it's funny when I see people protesting about oil and gas, and then they're sharing stuff on their iPhone. There's literally oil products in our phones. So I understand there's always going to be a use for it. But if we can have a good mix, I mean, some of the best energy experts in the world, whenever they do a speaking event, they say the same thing. We need more of the mix. We need nuclear. We need solar. We need wind. We need oil and gas. We need all of it together, and then it backs each other up. Sure, if there's brownouts and stuff in the winter, that's when the oil and gas kicks in. But in the summer, when the sun's out and it's beaming, let's use that energy that's at our disposal that's cheaper.
I knew I was going to blow it.
Yeah, Ryu Street Fighter
I
is...
know. I blew it. And
So
Justin's in the chat right now, and he says not to be that guy, Jespo, but finish him as a Mortal Kombat reference, not Street Fighter. And then he says he pushes up his glasses. Okay, Justin, that's Johnny. If you could just get the scoreboard, that's 2 points for Justin. That's 2 points for you, Justin. More information coming, friends, on how you can redeem your points.
Shout out. Speaking of glasses, it's Professor Fink. Heidi said.
Oh,
from
thank
The
you.
Simpsons.
Was that? That's 2 points for Heidi.
The energy episode.
I should, you know what? And I kind of like, I've lied to you guys a little. I've not been upfront completely. I have virtually zero credibility in the gaming world. Like I am terrible.
We talked about this the other day.
Last
time we played
year
video
university,
games, it was Super Mario Bros.
Yeah, well, I was okay. Tony Hawk Pro Skater when it first came out, I was pretty good at that. Yeah. But that was about it. And so I have no business making reference around gaming, and I appreciate that, Justin was very gentle about it there. He didn't attempt to humiliate me where he definitely could. Do we have Dante ready to rock right now, or we're going to get to him in just a quick second?
About
we're
30
talking
seconds
about
here.
Donald Trump, so in 30 seconds. You know what? Why don't I quickly remind people what's happening with Edmonton Opera, and then we'll get to Dante King. This just remarkable comments from Donald Trump in the face of unimaginable tragedy yesterday outside Washington, D.C., blaming DEI, essentially, for the plane crash. That coming up in just a quick second. First, if you don't have plans, beginning of February, our friends at Edmonton Opera want to let you know that they have a fabulous production touching down at the Jubilee Auditorium. It is Bluebeard's Castle, a profoundly moving production where love takes a center stage. How about an early Valentine's Day date, everybody? Originating from the Theatre of Sound in London, UK, this contemporary production tells a love story shadowed by dementia. Every door that Judith opens is a step into her past, exploring her memories and identity. Bluebeard's Castle is directed by Daisy Evans with a new English libretto, music arranged by Stephen Higgins. This is a story that's guaranteed to resonate deeply with anybody touched by memory loss. Don't miss Bluebeard's Castle, February 1st, 4th, 6th, and 7th at the Jubilee Auditorium in Edmonton. You can get your tickets at edmontonopera.com. Also want to give a shout out to our friends at California Closets. I know that a lot of you right now are trying to find a way. You want to get organized. You want to get your New Year's resolutions rolling. You promised yourself you were going to invest in your place and bring that kind of peace of mind when it comes home to a well-organized space. California Closets can help you get there, and it doesn't cost you a cent to get that conversation started. It all starts with a free design consultation. You can learn more about that, register for that consultation on their website. You can also check out the different budget levels that they have. I love this. Custom closets, systems, and storage solutions for your entire home, and you don't have to be a billionaire to do it. You can learn more. They have different levels of install, all of them beautiful, all of them guaranteed for life. From practical simplicity all the way up to luxury refined. You can find all the details and register for that consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. Also wanted to give a shout out to our friends at UCAN Youth Services. I know I'm talking about this event a lot coming up in March, but that's because we want to help them pack the house. UCAN Youth Services, if you were watching our January 30th episode, you saw the story of Ethan. If not, I encourage you to go back. It's like a 4-minute video that will move you, I promise. Ethan is one of the individuals. These are real life people. When we're talking about people's lives that are being changed, these are people, our fellow Canadians, that are tapping into the resources, some of the mental health resources, counseling resources, education or employment resources at UCAN Youth Services. And of course, it's changing people's lives, taking at-risk young people from 18 to 25 years old out of these destructive paths and onto paths to prosperity. Amazing stuff. A big part of how they raise money for that is their comedy nights, the 10th to the 12th and the 17th to the 19th of March. You can learn more at ucancomedy.com. These are professional comedians. We've got a table for 10. I'm excited to bring some of my friends, friends who love comedy, friends who love a night out, but also friends who I think the message of UCAN is going to resonate with them. 6 incredible nights of comedy coming up in March. You can learn more and reserve your table. Maybe make a donation of a silent auction item like we are on the website, ucancomedy.com. And our team, I guess they do feel like our team, don't they? At Complete Care Restoration, they're the ones that built this studio. We've been working with them for a few years now and have seen them in practice. So I can tell you and look you straight in the face that we give them 2 thumbs up based on our personal experience. Complete Care Restoration has been in the business of restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind for a quarter century with professional property restoration services based out of Edmonton, but they work all across the province. You know, for some, it's a sewer backup. For some, it's a wildfire. It could be a flood. It could be the discovery of black mold. You didn't even think you had a problem until all of a sudden you realized you did. Don't go it alone. Make sure you get in touch with Complete Care Restoration at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. Ms. KD says, now, Jespo, I don't think you should be talking about socks. I'm not making fun of the Prime Minister's socks. I'm making fun of the people that make fun of the Prime Minister's socks and act like that's his only policy. But it is one that lands with people, right? I think you'd say maybe the worst thing that Justin Trudeau ever had happen to him was being awarded like best hair in Ottawa, right? Because the opposition is gonna grab onto that more than he ever possibly could. But I support good-looking socks.
So do I. We gave him a pair of our socks when we were here. Still waiting to see a nice screenshot of him wearing them.
I just like to think that at some point that the Prime Minister's sitting down with whoever it is, maybe Donald Trump, Benjamin Netanyahu, maybe it'll be his post-political career. Mm-hmm. He'll be up on stage getting paid $300,000 to deliver a speech somewhere to some trade conference, and he'll be wearing his Real Talk socks.
It'd be amazing.
Which otherwise are exclusively available to our Patreon supporters. Those of you that support us on Patreon, we appreciate you. If you want to find out more about those exclusive benefits, we're always closing here, baby. We are always closing. Check out ryanjespersen.com under the Connect link. Horrific tragedy just outside Washington, D.C., just about 24 hours ago as a commuter jet, a passenger jet, collided with an American military helicopter. All souls on board both aircraft lost. And just an absolute tragedy. Obviously, the entire world is mourning with these families, including families involved in international figure skating teams. We're learning more about the crash. We don't know exactly what happened. And the American president, Donald Trump, definitely didn't know what happened when he stepped up to the podium just hours after the crash as rescue and recovery efforts were still underway and said this.
We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions because over the years I've watched as things like this happen and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary, and my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. Various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg. A real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run the Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit.
10 years, the guy still doesn't know how to pronounce his name, but
you don't hear
geniuses. We need geniuses.
Well, and people with severe, he makes it sound like people with severe intellectual disabilities are acting as air traffic controllers. And anyway, let's go to an expert on this. We wanted to reach out to somebody that knows what they're talking about for measured and informed insight of the president's comments. Dante King was director of workforce learning and development for J.P. Morgan Chase, has worked as a learning and HR business consultant for Wells Fargo. He's taught at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine, the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine, Stanford Medical School. You may have heard of it, and Johns Hopkins as well. He's the author of the upcoming book, Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness. Dante, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to Real Talk. Thanks for making time for us. How do you wrap your mind around what your president said yesterday?
Recording stopped.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I first would like to say that my heart goes out to the people who lost their lives in the horrific tragedy that you just showed. I also, my heart goes out to their families too. It's almost like a parody watching him speak, because he is the most inadequate, unprepared person I've ever seen. And he's continued to appoint people who lack experience, who lack qualifications, who lack skills. And, we're watching something that seems like a reality show take place. He is not only not measured, but he's uninformed. And that's very dangerous. But more than that, he is callous and inhumane. To get up at that podium and not acknowledge the significant losses, the feelings, the emotions of people, the family members, friends of the people who lost their lives. I just thought it was a display of the inhumanity that this country was founded upon.
I guess I wasn't surprised, because it is Donald Trump. I wasn't surprised to see like Barack Obama in the crosshairs, Pete Buttigieg in the crosshairs. It wouldn't be the first time that the president has used tragedy to push political narratives. But why do you think he went after DEI? Like there's more to it.
Well, and I talk about that in my book. And so this is the copy of my book. It's Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness, White Psychopathology, Collective Psychosis, and Trauma in America. For hundreds of years now, people from various European ethnic groups, it started, we can trace it as far back as the Spanish, the French, but particularly the English, became preoccupied with this concept of whiteness. And it's very interesting because I was doing a training here recently, and I asked the participants, some of which of whom were white, to write down the definition, the textbook definition, either a scientific and or a legal definition, in terms of what it means to be a white person or a Black person. And no one could come up with the standard definition because there aren't any. We are talking about concepts that were instituted in this culture to enshrine an idea of whiteness, that people are superior because they are white, and whiteness was akin to being pure or holy. And Blackness was akin, in at least certain European traditions, akin to being devilish or evil or nasty. And so they were enshrined in this culture for the purposes of, advantaging people who were considered white and disadvantaging people who were considered not white or Black. And that goes to, if you go look at the 1790 Naturalization Act, the first act that the United States Congress passed concerning citizenship, the predicate for citizenship was one had to be a free white person in order to access it. And so it is very sad to see on many levels that hundreds of years later, we have people who are delusional, very delusional, who are preoccupied with this idea of whiteness, that they are superior because of it, and that all others are inferior. And this whole attachment or obsession with DEI and merit-based, the usage of the term merit, attached to a delusional idea that people who work the hardest, who are the most capable and qualified, are able-bodied, cisgendered, heterosexual white men, is not only delusional thinking, it is extremely perverse, corrupt, and dangerous. And so the usage of such terms in the ways that Donald Trump is using it and people who are associated with him, it's unbelievable. I cannot believe where we are right now in our country.
Dante, Randy's watching us live right now on YouTube. He's in our live chat powered by Park Power. Says, translation, if you're an air traffic controller who's brown or Black, you're intellectually challenged. He says, what a racist POS. You're somebody, you've got a deep experience in workforce development. What do you say about the argument that DEI is lowering standards or prioritizing identity over qualifications?
Well, I just talked about the prioritization of identity, right? We know that from the founding of this country back in the 18th century, and I'll just share with you a brief quote. This is from President Abraham Lincoln. He says, I will say then that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of bringing about in any way the social and political equality of the white and Black races, that I am not, nor ever have been, in favor of making voters or jurors of Negroes, nor of qualifying them to hold office. And so when we talk about this idea of identity politics or prioritizing certain identities, we have to understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs were instituted to try and mitigate centuries of white preferential treatment and the system of white affirmative action that operates within and throughout all of American institutions, beginning with the legal system. And that's one of the things that I trace in my book forensically back to the 17th century. We can go as far back as even as the 15th century. when you look at how foreign relations occurred between certain European groups and certain people from Africa. But if you come into looking at the United States and how the United States has existed and how it has operated and functioned in all ways. It's only 60 years ago where businesses and organizations were required to take down their whites only signs. Companies and organizations had whites only policies. They would not hire Black people in certain organizations and or to hold certain positions. And so we have to understand this whole idea that DEI is somehow now advantaging or, giving preferential treatment to non-white people. That's just a false idea. It's not real. It's meant to mitigate discriminatory practices and discriminatory outcomes, and it has far much more to do with attempting to neutralize outcomes from people from historically marginalized groups, such as people who might be challenged in dealing with disabilities, people who have experienced gender discrimination, sexual discrimination, sex discrimination, or discrimination based on sexuality. It's much more far-reaching than just having to do with race. But the way in which it is being used and the ways in which certain people, such as Donald Trump, people affiliated with him, and people on the far right are using it, they are hyper-focused and obsessed with race and racism.
We're talking to Dante King. Dante Idris is watching us, says, I'm a writer, and words matter in meaning and context, and how it's used by power matters. JDE says anybody that is vehemently against DEI and uses merit as their reason is telling on themselves. True DEI is about giving everyone the same chance. You're just mad you don't have an advantage anymore. We got an email as we're talking to you from Brady, who says that he works in aviation, says the irony is that many DEI initiatives were born out of fields like aviation and healthcare to ensure better safety and performance. Says, could you ask Dante to speak to the real benefits of DEI in high-stakes industries? What would you say to Brady?
Well, there was a study that came out some years ago that showed, for example, I think this had to do when they were testing dummies in certain cars and vehicles and testing airbags. And they noticed that whoever the manufacturer was of the airbags and the way that they were programmed into certain vehicles, the impact only considered those of a certain stature, those of a certain weight, height, and build. And so what they then became aware of is that the airbag pressure was too intense and too severe for people who were not built essentially like men. And what they came to, one of the conclusions they came to was that they may have not considered a variety of different opinions. And so they had to go back to the drawing board to understand, who was missing from the table, who needed to be included, and the different adjustments that needed to be made. Because what they found is that I think women and children were dying at a higher rate due to the impact of airbags. And so it helps. I can't even quantify what it does in terms of having diverse perspectives and input when certain decisions are being made.
Dante King is the author of Diagnosing Whiteness and Anti-Blackness. You can read more about it, order your copy, and get in touch with Dante by visiting his website, danteking.com. We'll link to it in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. Thanks for making yourself available today. We appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both.
You got it. Let us know what you think about what you just heard to talk at ryanjespersen.com. I know Dante lit a fire under a whole bunch of you in the live chat, powered by Park Power. Sure appreciate that. John, we have reached the point in the show where we're going to do a big draw here, and I want to make sure we do it on time because we announced to some of our early bird qualifiers. I let them know in an email, an exclusive email yesterday ahead of the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic that we were going to be doing this at 9:30 Mountain Time, which is pretty much exactly where we're at right now. So I want to hit the post, as they might say in radio. But before I do, I want to let you know that the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic would not happen without the incredible sponsorship and support of our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy. And we have saved their shout out in today's show for right now because, as you may know, the team at Kubi is also the defending champions of the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic. The now renamed Tim Loznick Memorial Trophy, the Lozzie Cup, will be handed out on Saturday at Larry Alexiak Field in St. Albert. Will the team at Kubi be able to defend their title, or will we have a new champion? I know the Northsiders have won this many years. They're looking to come take it back. We'll see. Oh, yeah, and by the way, Kubi is also the busiest solar installer in Western Canada. They're hiring right now, and they'd love to give you a quote for putting solar up on your roof this spring. You can learn more about it. Get your free quote today by visiting kubi.ca. All right, so we've got 15 teams. We got 24 teams entered in the tournament. The tournament is sold out again. I want to thank everybody for doing that. This is the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic presented by our friends at Molson Canadian. Just absolutely incredible sponsors. And by the way, I did also want to mention Arctic Therm are our sponsors of the 700,000 BTU propane heater that's going to be keeping everybody warm in the festival tent. I did notice somebody in the chat asking earlier, will we be purchasing carbon offset credits for the 700,000 BTU propane heater? The short answer is no. However, I do believe
we should be. That's like my air conditioner at home is
Propane
7,000. I can't even
clean.
imagine how much. How
what would you rather have us doing? Listen, we could
have a fire extinguisher.
We could be having a big coal fire. Would everybody appreciate we just burn a bunch of coal at Center Ice? Is that what you'd prefer? We're burning it clean with propane.
I like it. I'm just, the number amazes me. So like I can't wait to see this thing and see the heat it puts out.
Yeah. So it's going to be a great day, and a courtesy of our friends, our presenting sponsors at Molson Canadian. As you know, we have the early bird prize, which we're about to draw for here live on the show. There's going to be DQ bucks in there. You're not going to buy a beer at the Pond Hockey Classic. We got your beers covered, and there's a whole lot more. Gift certificates, gift cards, amazing, presenting sponsorship again from Molson, but also Central Social Hall, everybody else. And we'll be showing a lot of love to our sponsors at the tournament itself. But John, right now, why don't we take your camera? You're going to be doing the draw. I want to keep my hands off it so there's no concerns around nepotism.
This is my big shot.
There's no favoritism.
All right, so here we got a brand new this is Van Color mugs. Thank you again to Mo Amir from Vancouver. These are absolutely incredible.
Yeah, why don't we throw that? You want to throw the names? Read them name by name. Show that so everybody knows that their team is in the mix.
These are real names.
Why don't we draw them? Why don't we draw them
okay?
out of the hockey helmet?
Yeah,
we got the
bucket.
bucket there. So what's team number one? We're gonna read each name.
I'm just gonna show you, like, because people might think they're all the same. That's
I want you to read the names because they're hilarious names. Yeah. So
Power Hawks.
Yeah.
We got the Mofos.
The Mofos.
Okay, come on. That's pretty easy, guys. Put some work in here. The Southside Dilfs.
Oh, the Dilfs.
Oh, the dads.
I like that one. I like that one.
We got the Cold Brews.
Nice.
We've got the Midlife Crisis. I'm in one of those right now.
Oh, you know what? I blew that up, actually. I screwed up there. Can I say?
Oh.
I typed. It's actually Mid-Ice Crisis.
That's even better.
Mid-Ice Crisis.
The Apex Icebreakers.
Our team at Apex Automation back in the mix.
Boosh Vision.
Ooh.
I don't know what that means, but hey.
Yeah, the blue line.
Sully's Corn Stars, always a fan favorite.
The Corn Stars, yeah.
Been there every year. Keebler's Elves.
Okay.
So obviously there's a guy named Keebler. He's got his buddies. Hat Trick Swayze, that's another fan
They are
favorite.
the defending champs.
Great name.
Hat Trick
great
Swayze,
name,
defending
great name.
champions.
Sasky Pond Snakes.
Yeah.
We've got the Ryle HC.
A Real Hockey Club,
HC,
yeah.
And I think
Do you have
that's
Every Day
all.
We're Buffalin' in there?
Right
I want to
there.
make sure I think you do.
Because it's your team.
Every Day We're Buffalin'. Yeah.
And the Northsiders, of course.
The Northsiders, the first, the Northsiders.
They always get there first because they're
like,
on the north side.
I got to be careful using the word dynasty, but the Northsiders have won this thing a lot. Everybody comes with the Northsiders in the crosshairs.
So come on over here. I'll throw them in the bucket, and I want you to choose.
I'm going to hold the bucket, and then you're going to pick the name, okay?
Okay. I'm going to mix them up here, guys. Here we go. Here we go. You hold the bucket and give it a little. You give it a mix too, so everyone knows it's not. Okay, ready? Here we go. Just chat to them for 1 sec.
All right, so Johnny Infamous drawing the winning ticket. Six tickets to the Oilers-Leafs game. No, you can't look. 6 tickets to the Oilers-Leafs game, limo bus transportation to get there. This team is going to have a Saturday made in ice hockey heaven. And the winner of our early bird prize is the Apex Icebreaker.
Oh, our friends at Apex Automation, the Apex Icebreakers. have won. It's going to be an amazing game at Rogers Place. Me and Ryan are going to be there as well.
You guys better get some
Congratulations,
sleep.
guys.
If I know anything about the team at Apex Automation, you guys better get some sleep and drink some water tonight. Goose, I see you in the chat asking, will there be any surprises from Joy Botanicals tomorrow at the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic? What do you think, bud?
Nice hoodie.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
For our podcast audio listeners, Ryan's wearing a baby blue. It looks so comfortable.
Thank you very much. You know, you can get
Joy
merch.
Botanicals hoodie.
Yeah, we're not allowed to advertise. The Canadian government does not allow cannabis companies to advertise. And so this is not an advertisement. But I'm just telling you, if you want to get a hoodie like the one I'm wearing, I'm just telling you where I got my hoodie. You can find it online at joybotanicals.com. That's JOI botanicals.com. You know who's going to be handling the burgers? You know who's going to be providing the burgers at the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic? Our amazing friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, in particular the Cardinal family. Absolutely amazing crew. And we have them to thank every Friday, our final episode of the week, for our fieriest 5 minutes, without a doubt. This is where Real Talkers fire us their hottest takes. It's the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, and we thought we'd lead with one on trade, considering these tariffs that'll be implemented tomorrow, most likely. This one from Scott, who says, Jean Chrétien needs to stay retired. I find it very interesting that Chrétien's decided to weigh in on this conversation about tariffs in the U.S. Back in '93, you'll remember the Liberals formed a majority government and NAFTA had not yet taken effect. And rather than use this opportunity to fight for Canada and Canadian jobs, Prime Minister Chrétien kept the agreement, arguing it was a great day for Canada and our trade relationship with Mexico and the U.S. But over the next 30 years, we gradually lost our manufacturing sector to Mexico. The auto sector saw thousands of jobs move as plants closed and reopened in Mexico. He says Mr. Chrétien did win 3 straight majorities, but not because he was a great prime minister. Has more to do with the fact that the Conservative vote was split between 3 parties. I thought Chrétien, says Scott in Sherwood Park, was one of the more arrogant prime ministers. When we were experiencing high unemployment in Saskatchewan in the 90s, he told us to quit bitching and get back to work. Jean Chrétien, in my opinion, doesn't care about the consequences of his actions and has never taken responsibility for keeping NAFTA, so I would appreciate if he kept his mouth shut. He had one chance to fight for Canada in the 90s, and he blew it. That from Scott in Sherwood Park. What about this one from Pilot One, who says when the National Energy Program was imposed, the unemployment rate in Alberta rose from 3.7 to 12.4%. The bankruptcy rate rose by 150%, and Alberta's losses were estimated to be between $50 and $100 billion. People need to know this before they condemn Danielle Smith and her lone wolf policies. Alberta was attacked in the 80s, and if we join this clown show now, the same thing's going to happen. Smith is doing the right thing. This is important for Canadians to realize. We could have stepped up and been united in energy and trade, but we didn't, and now everybody wants Alberta to take it on the chin again. Real talkers have influence. This show does, says Pilot One, and people need to know the truth of what could happen. For every oil job lost, there's another job lost in other sectors. Remember that from Pilot One. What about this one from Greg? Jespo, I'm a regular listener of Real Talk. I appreciate how you discuss issues in a balanced and informative way. Thank you very much. He says, I've read various reports about the release of Alberta's COVID-19 response. We talked about this yesterday with the new president of the Alberta Medical Association, January 30th episode. Check it out. He says, released on a Friday afternoon. Didn't you know? Nothing to see here. What a report. To think the government spent $2 million on this claptrap, using ivermectin, an insecticide used on livestock to treat COVID, sounds more like snake oil than science. The health minister quoted on saying the report contains a broad range of perspectives, but all of them based on actual science. What? Says this government spent $2 million on a diluted report, and then on the next breath, they'll cut funding to groups helping disabled people. Not much compassion, not a good look. This is what predators do in the wild. Greg says, I'm annoyed that Danielle Smith thinks the government's protecting Albertans from lawsuits in coal. Says of the 2 options available, mining or lawsuits seem to be the best of the worst, because at least we have a clear understanding of the final cost to Albertans. That from Greg. How about this one from Karen, who says Erica Baruti's comments on coal in a recent episode of Real Talk made my head explode. She spoke about the referendum in the Crow's Nest Pass and the people had to live there voting in favor of Grassy Mountain, except for the mine is located in the MD of Ranchland, which is north of Crow's Nest Pass. Did they have a referendum in Ranchland? Of course not, because the residents there are opposed to the mine. Karen says, I'm one of the crazies on the left. She talks about screaming with a sign on my lawn. I've had a Mountains Not Mines sticker on the back of my car since the first protests. Close to 80% of Albertans' opinions have not changed. We don't want mining in the eastern slopes. Erica said, quote, Karen in Edmonton shouldn't have a say about what happens in the Crow's Nest Pass. Well, I'm Karen in Lethbridge, and the water from those eastern slopes runs downstream to the Old Man River, which is my drinking water, so hell yeah, I should have a say. Thanks to Real Talk for continuing to talk about this issue. Keep up the good work. Have a great weekend. Karen in Lethbridge, a.k.a. a raging granny. This one from Wayne. This is a YouTube comment on one of our coal episodes. He says, energy costs need to come down, period. And if people are hurting bad enough and the economy gets bad enough, people are going to start burning tires to heat their homes. Don't burn tires to heat your homes. He says people will poach grizzly bears to feed their families. Wayne, not a good idea. He says it's hard for government-paid officials to understand what common, hardworking taxpayers feel when their lifestyle and paychecks and pensions exclude them from what normal people feel, right? If you're a politician making a guaranteed $250 a year, it's easy to point fingers and focus on the environment. If you're making $150 in your household, everything's going okay, but 8 years later now you're worried about how you're going to feed your family and politicians are telling you you're a bad person. Guess what? People don't care. People will burn tires and poach grizzly bears. You take a man's pride and ability to provide for his family away and the earth will burn. Danielle Smith understands something fundamental to our culture that you're not seeing, Jespersen. Western Canada's culture is based on providing for their own, not rebate checks and government handouts. Says, I'm not convinced Canada survives the next 4 years of Trump. Canadian politicians preparing for a friendly game of poker, and Trump's dismantling everything. Wayne says, I moved to Canada when I was 10. I've loved this country. I call it my own. But Canada's best days are distant. I'd love to see a resurgence in Canadian nationalism, pride in our nation, Canada becoming a superpower, and it's not going to happen by China being paid to pollute while our citizens suffer. That from Wayne. And how about this one from Ronnie, who says, Jespo, I was horrified to hear that there had been a small, far-right, neo-Nazi rally in my literal backyard of St. Albert. This is the kind of thing you'd expect your elected officials to condemn, but I'd be hard-pressed to see either Danielle Smith or anyone in her cabinet condemn it. You know why? Because that's their base. And the only political opinion that matters to these people, any silence from the premier on this or anyone in government is a tacit endorsement of the ideology. That from Ronnie. You can fire up your flamethrower anytime to talk@ryanjespersen.com. It is proudly presented by the DQs in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and in Sherwood Park on Baseline Road. Thanks to everybody who fires up their flamethrower every single week, including comments on YouTube. Thanks for subscribing there, and thanks in advance for joining us this weekend, Saturday, from 9 to 3:30 at Larry Alexiak Field in St. Albert for the annual Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic presented by Molson Canadian. Infamous is going to be spinning the tunes. We got Real Talkers showing up to help our volunteers. We love you so much, and 24 teams fighting to win the Wazzy Cup. We'll see you there, and if not, we'll talk to you again on Monday. Take care.